Oh, I have lots of convention memories. I don't know if I can talk about all of them on live, but my very favorite convention memory is my very first convention. I believe it was at the Hyatt Regency. I think that's the name of the place we used to go year after year, and it was my first convention, and we went there, and Jack Salties was the convention chair and had done a great job in spending every bit of money in our treasury. We had fantastic hors d'oeuvres, drinks all night, after dinner drinks, before dinner drinks, during dinner drinks, and Cuban cigars, and it was very difficult to get up the next morning to attend any functions.
Well, first of all, I want to say happy anniversary to WDTL for 50 years. I've been a proud member for 46 years. I've probably been to over 30 conventions during my long career, and I don't really have any favorite memories. I just have a couple of short stories to tell. One of them involves Jeff Tilden before he became rich and famous, and he probably drives a $75,000 to $100,000 car now. But in the old days, on our first convention in Whistler, Jeff was driving a beat-up old car that he probably started driving in high school, and it got him through college and law school and trips from the East Coast out to Seattle. And Jeff was driving up to Whistler by himself, and his car, his old jalopy of a car, went dead in the water somewhere between Vancouver and Whistler. And when I went by later that day, I saw it parked off to the side, and I knew right away whose car it was. And the rumor is that Jeff got to Whistler that year by using the thumb of his right hand. The second story involves me and my wife. When I became president of WDTL, the convention was at the Coeur d'Alene Inn, and we had the suite on the top floor of the hotel, just a beautiful hotel room. I've never stayed in anything like that before. On Saturday night during the party, Mike Runyon and a group of unnamed thugs, I think that included Walt Tabler, broke into our room and short-sheeted our bed. And so at midnight, when my wife and I stumbled into bed that night, we discovered what had occurred in our absence, and I knew who the chief culprit was right away. The third short story I have involves another past president, Mary Spillane. We were whitewater rafting one year, and she and I were in the same raft, and we had our life preservers on. She fell out of the raft into the river, and somehow I was able to grab her and pull her back into the boat. So whenever I see her, I always say, don't ever forget who saved your life.
My best memory is probably when I was president at Whistler. I did wear my kilt. There are pictures. I did fit in it in those days. And my memory from that is that I gave the President's Award to Fred Betts. And Fred was easily in his 90s at the time, spry, did not know he was getting the award, and was truly touched, and I was thrilled to give it to him. That's my best memory, is Fred Betts when I wore the kilt when I was president.
Well, I don't know that I can find just one convention memory that's the best. I think it's more a mix of all of the conventions I've attended. Each convention, I remember seeing old friends or meeting new people or hearing something new. Every convention has those elements that are the reason I keep going.
My convention was, my biggest issue for me personally was making sure we had it at a place where the weather was warm. We wouldn't have to deal with any rain. And so therefore, I chose, and there was some conflict about it, that I wanted to go to Sun Mountain because I just knew on the east side of the mountains the weather would be nice. The other issue was a desire to pick a new place so that maybe we'd have additional people, members that would come because they'd never been there before. So my best memory is being able to have it at that venue. We had a lot of people that either hadn't come ever before or hadn't come for a number of years. We had a lot of outdoor events. The sun was shining, and except for a few people being unhappy because there were no televisions, I think we had a good time. At least I assume so, because the group has gone back there since.
Well, I would say the one thing I really liked about the convention is it was always family-oriented, and most of our summer vacations involved WDTL and going to the convention. I think the one that stood out the most was playing golf in the rain in Whistler. And I'm not a golfer, but for some reason it was the most fun I'd ever had playing golf, and it was just a great memory for me, mainly because it was John McCormick's last time, probably the only time I ever played golf with him. So,
you know, I have so many convention memories. It's hard to pick one out. Several of them are not necessarily appropriate for this type of interview, so I'll leave that. But the one memory that was kind of a funny convention memory was back before I was on the board, and so Nora didn't know me all that well. And the time came for the golf tournament pairings and whatnot, and she called to get my handicap, because back in those days the golf tournament was a big deal, and they kind of grouped the better golfers together and the crummy golfers together. And she got my secretary, and my secretary asked me what my handicap was, and I said it was 0. Excuse me, I said I didn't have a handicap. Well, my secretary called Nora back and said he said his handicap is 0. And Nora, knowing that meant I was a scratch golfer and probably should be on the tour, questioned about that. I said, no, Brad said he's a 0 handicap. And so Nora put me with all the big mucky muck, big time golfers, when in fact I'm not a particularly good golfer. And so that was somewhat humorous. But the funny part of the story is I then went out and played the best round of golf of my life, won the tournament, beat all the mucky mucks, and it made for a humorous after story.
I'm ashamed to say, but at the time in the 80s, we drank a lot more than people drink today. For many years, the convention every year was in Vancouver. Saturday night, we'd eat dinner, we would dance, and then still up, and I was much younger then, still drinking, we'd go out in the lobby, and the young guys would listen to the old guys who were still at it at 1 in the morning, tell stories about their careers and trial against each other. And these were real titans. Ron Mintel was always the last to bed. Jim Murphy, Ogden and Murphy, Henry Kasner. Back in the days when contributory fault was a complete bar, every case got tried and the defense won almost all of them. And they'd had 300, 500 jury trials. And as a young guy, it just felt tremendous to get to sit there at the feet of the masters and hear them talk.
That would have to be one of the first or early conventions that I attended, 1993 at Skamania Lodge. It was the first time we'd been there. The resort itself just opened. Nora Tabler was the executive director, and it was a joint convention with Oregon, the Oregon Defense Bar. And in the bar, one of the 2 evenings, there was like an air band with the Jeff Tilden, Mike Runyon, the president of the Oregon Bar, and Judge Hayden, Michael Hayden, was there attending, and he had been on the bench for probably less than a year. He knew that my wife and I, Terry, were engaged, and I guess in the spirit of the excitement, wanted to marry us right there on the dance floor because, well, he could.
I think when I was president, we started having meetings outside of Seattle, and we went to Port Ludlow. It was a small enough group that my wife prepared all the hors d'oeuvres, and actually one of the good memories I had was the first meeting I went to. I went to work for Frank Roberts, who ultimately became a judge, but he was a pretty hard-nosed defense attorney, and he introduced me to the defense trial lawyers, but it wasn't called that at that time. WADA, I think it was. At any rate, The meeting was at what was then Northwestern Mutual's legal department with Hugh Magoo. The people I remember were Hal Faso, Jack Schofield, Roy Mosseri, Hugh Magoo, a bunch of the old-timers who were really great role models. I was always, whenever I got to meet with those folks, was always impressed by their professionalism. I tried a few cases against some and with some, and they were great role models. They knew what they were doing. They were hard-nosed, but they communicated without, 5 nasty letters and 14 telephone calls and 73 emails, and they got things accomplished.
My memory is probably somewhat egocentric. I love the convention that I put together as the chair, as the president-elect. We did it at Sun Mountain, which is just one of my favorite places. Beautiful, very relaxed, warm kind of atmosphere. The speakers were great. It seemed like people really got into it. I remember one of our speakers threw things, T-shirts and things out at the audience, which got everybody involved. But probably the best moment of that convention was after I had been introduced as the incoming president, and I finally got to relax and just enjoy the people, the place. And then after that, we were all dancing, including you, Kristen. And Matt Wojcik's son, Jake, who was about 2 at the time, was dancing up a storm. He is an unbelievable dancer and had the most amazing rhythm and movements for a 2-year-old. So that was a great final thing for the convention.
And you may remember this because this was your first convention too. It was your first year, and we had a very interesting and dramatic lead-in to our convention because we didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but we put together what I think was a great program that included Ann Bremner. And Ann was tasked with talking about the Vili Falau, Mary Kay Letourneau matter. And in the course of her presentation, I will never forget Ann stepping off of the podium. And as only Ann can do, and we, of course, love Ann for this, she stepped over to her makeup bag, pulled out her lip gloss, and in the middle of her presentation, swiped her lips very quickly and added a whole new gloss to the presentation. And it was fabulous. Again, it's something that I think only Ann could do and do effectively. And it was so that's my most persistent memory.
I think that the most fun that I ever had was one of my very first conventions. It was up at Whistler, and somebody suggested that we go out to a bar that's name is escaping me right now. And I walked in about a half an hour after everyone else had left, and there were a clutch of WDTL people dancing in a very vigorous fashion, led apparently by one of our past presidents, Andy. And I thought to myself, these guys are pretty cool. They're young and they're hip. And then it occurred to me, actually, no, they're not. But they're comfortable enough with each other that they can go out and do this kind of thing and have fun without pretense, without pride, just having a good time with each other. And that impressed me as a young lawyer and really helped build my interest in the organization.
Convention up in Vancouver, that was the working that we had at the seminar. And he had a fancy room in Vancouver that was a room with the penthouse, if you will. And David, at that time, was a young child. He's now in his 20s. I'll show you how long ago that was. Anyway, he was supposed to be upstairs in the upstairs room watching TV. And Bob went up there, and he was nowhere to be found. Bob was understandably upset. And had he looked, David was down singing with the band with his fuzzy slippers.